Almost 2 decades ago, when I was just 9 years old, the world as I knew it ended before my young imagination could even begin to fathom what that would entail. My mom had passed away too soon, and Dad and I were trying to fill the void clumsily with our own brand of grief. Life had a beat, and it was the same sad, monotonous melody we marched to until Dad changed key. Her name was Marlene. And one night, Dad sat me at the kitchen table, rewrapping his fingers around Mom's black coffee mug. "Sophia, do you mind meeting someone for me tomorrow?" "Oh yeah, her name's Marlene, and I know." "Well, she is kind of a friend," he said, looking away from me. "Why, Dad? Who is she?" Excited and a bit dismayed. My curiosity was piqued, but I also had that knot in the pit of my stomach. There was something in the way he would not look me in the eye to be anything more than a friend. Dad sighed, a weary sound. I just think it's time, pumpkin. The sooner we start to rediscover any joy in living. One day, Marlene came into our house. Her presence created a kind of atmosphere that was alien to this place. The lady was smiling, and sweet as pie, offering her hand bright with rings. "Hello, Sophia." She spoke with a sweet voice. "I have heard so much about you." I turned and shook hands with her, noticing the chill of her skin. "Ah," I said under my breath as Dad started to give her a tour. My eyes followed her as she scanned the living room, walking a few steps behind. Her smile faded, however, partially when her eyes reached the family photos, Mom primarily, and a momentary little expression of scorn made its way across her face. I saw it, even if Dad didn't. This was in August, and before I knew it, months had went by. Marlene went from being Dad's friend to Dad's wife. The true colors that eventually revealed themselves were not the stark and brash nature of a whore, but rather shades disguised by deceptions sprinkled with lies. After dinner, Dad asked me about my outgrown wardrobe. "That is until Sophia started getting big." He mentioned offhand, "We will have to get her some new school clothes." Just listen how Marlene was fast to pounce on this chance. "Oh, let me handle that. Shop online, I know what she likes, and I'm going to get the best for Sophia." Her voice lathered with barely above mild excitement. A week later, Marlene unrolled the treasures from her shopping spree. I looked absolutely ridiculous, the outfits all several sizes too large on my desperate 12th grade shoulders and pooling fabric at me feet. "Look at this, darling. I bought it all on clearance and she will grow into most of them." "TISESCLYWHATIWNTE," cried Marlene, holding up a tent masquerading as a dress. Her dad smiled back, proud and thankful. "Marlene, that's brilliant. So thoughtful of you." I tried to protest, but Dad, "They're too big. I'll look silly." The expression was honeyed but condescending. She had cut off Marlene. "Oh, darling, it's for the best. Kids your age grow so fast. Not to mention, we're saving cash on more essential items." My face burned with embarrassment. School the next day was just what I expected. Hey, Scarecrow. After all, what happened to the other part of the barn? The taunts echoed, and every word pierced my heart like a needle in madness. I went home that day with my big clothes swallowing me, a spirit as jagged and broken up. I used to tell Dad about the teasing, but Marlene was always one step ahead again, with her glistening lies and candy-coated deceit. "Sophia, Sophia, those people are jealous, I am positive. You are so beautiful, and keep in mind, we are making sensible decisions," she said with her hand lying on top of mine. Dad agrees. Huh. And she wasn't even on a computer. Marlene's right, pumpkin. It's all about being smart. Things just go worse after the whole clothes debate. Marlene, my stepmom, was doing the perfect job to play her part, deceiving everyone and pretending to be nice. On the outside, she was your perfect mother, but behind closed doors is where you got to see a whole different person. One evening, while Dad was working double shift, Marlene offered to help me with my homework. "Sophia, can we please just do this math?" she said sweetly, a snarl in her voice. Being well aware of what happened to her proposed help, I wanted no part in this. "Jesus, I have it, Marlene," gesturing at the doll now on my person in response to attempt and keep the shakiness out of my voice. "Nonsense," she said, and dragged a chair over next to me. The moment she leaned down to review my workbook, her critiques started. "Sophia, darling, this is all wrong. Is this still unclear to you? It's simple arithmetic." What she said cut me to the bone, but my math was correct. "I double-checked it, Marlene. That's exactly like the examples in the book." I attempted to defend myself, more exasperated by the minute. Marlene shook her head and tutted. "Then you must have misread the textbook. Allow me to demonstrate the proper way." And then she make it wrong. When my math teacher was reviewing the homework, I got an exhortation to better check over it in class right before everyone. I was humiliated even more to say that it wasn't my fault. I tried to talk it over with Dad that night. "Tell Dad what happened with my math homework on purpose, Marlene," I pleaded. Dad sighed, worn out from work. "Sophia, Marlene sent you help. You know, maybe you're not recognizing her efforts." That was followed by the parent-teacher conference. Marlene refused not to go with Dad. "I want to be a part of Sophia's upbringing," she announced, playing the role of perfect stepmother. And on the day of the conference, oh my goodness, Marlene was all smiles and laughs with my teachers. "Thank you so much for everything you're doing with Sophia. I know she can be a handful, but we are in it to get her," said wise Lehrer. And the worst part was how she volunteered for every school event from hell to breakfast and presented herself as such a saint, giving up her life like that with grace and gentle submission. Is what stepchildren learn about love. She tried making sure the other parents knew, in soft tones filled with a slight worry. "It is the least I can do for dear Sophia. She has lost her mother, after all." And they totally fell for it. Hook, line and sinker. The saint was obviously Marlene and I, the troubled child, who apparently did not deserve to be loved, nor has she done enough for me. And finally one evening I hardened my heart and decided no, tonight was not another dinner where we all acted like everything was fine. Marlene had cooked, and it was the casserole she knew that I hated but always made me eat because, in her words, "It's your sin." Bath, 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 bath. "Can you set the table, Sophia?" When Dad strolled to the kitchen, oblivious to what was about to transpire, as he asked. "I don't see why I should." "You all shut up and let Marlene do it," I barked. "Wow, that hurts me," Marlene said with fake shock as pretended to put her hand on heart. "Oh, I just figured you wanted to make yourself useful, Sophia. I made your favorite." I snickered. I could not hold my disgust. A favorite of mine, or just one of those random things you're whipping up because it gives your hands something to do? Dad's smile faded and confusion settled on his face. "Sophia, don't talk to Marlene like that. She's trying to ruin my life, more like," I said lowly so that both she and the man could overhear me. The dinner that followed was a nightmare. Each forkful of casserole was a failure, and every word uttered by Marlene felt like an insult. I pushed food around my plate for a few minutes, then I got up, suddenly forcing the seat of the chair to scrape loudly against its wooden surface. "I'm not hungry," I pronounced, and turned to leave this stifling air. Marlene's voice stopped me before I could depart. "Sophia, your behavior of late has been a concern. Perhaps it is time to enforce some structured discipline." Dad, as ever the peacemaker, let out a sigh. "Sophia, we only want what's best for you." I guess the age-old question comes up. Should I do what's best for me, or should I do what is truthfully best for her? I joked, nodding to Marlene, "'Cause it sounds like you only hear hers." It finished with a grounding, and me in my room, stuck by myself, left to ponder the evil seed that germinated inside of me. Things were like a war zone every single day with Marlene, but after my bold act of rebellion at the dinner table, not long afterwards battle was joined. All the little slip-ups, all innocent mistakes were suddenly proof that I was a rebel or an ill-natured person. Marlene had a gift of turning things around where inherently I was always to blame. Dad just acquiesced. One day, when I accidentally spilled a glass of juice in the kitchen, something was waiting to be unraveled and unwelcome guests began knocking on my door. Marlene swooped down like a hawk, peering through an almost joyfully judging face. "Look at this mess, Sophia. That is precisely what I am talking about right there. Carelessness. It's just like your mother." Marlene's voice fell as the inference permeated the room. My anger rose and I could feel color draining from my face. Bringing Mom into this was a low blow, even for Marlene. "Fuck you, shit stain. Asterisk, don't start with my mom, okay, slut. You're nothing like her." Father dashed in looking worn. He had heard the disturbance. "What's all this?" Sophia apologized to Marlene. "It was just an accident." "I will not." I shot back, my voice rising. "She is always pointing the finger at me, calling me clumsy and stupid. Just like Mom was. But she's wrong." If you could see it, Dad's face was stone-cold stern. "Sophia, that's enough. Marlene's only trying to help. She cares about you." "Cares about me?" The thought was laughable. My voice was breaking as I turned to Dad. "How can you say that? She is still riding my ass about being the perfect wife and stepmom in front of you. But she's not. You get it, and you never listened to me." Years later, when the house was silent, and I had a moment to mull over everything, it struck me how much damage that did. And more importantly, my sense of self and confidence were both crumbling beneath Marlene's constant bashing. It was no longer in the sense of fighting back. It was about holding on to me and who I think my mom wanted me to be. Our home life had become this sort of silent war. I was learning to sidestep Marlene's jabs, head bowed under the electric light in hopes of passing unnoticed. That is, until one run-of-the-mill Tuesday everything shifted. It was strange that Dad did not come downstairs for breakfast. He was the first up, a habit of decades to start early in his job. I made my own way over to his space, assuming he might have needed a sick day, something I never saw him do. I knew something was up the second I opened their door and heard how eerily quiet it had become. Silence that sits on you, echoing with terror. "Dad?" I could hardly speak above a whisper, frozen on the floor. He lay there so limp, too limp. As he fell, a wave of panic stormed over me, and I hurried to his side. My hand trembled as I reached for him. I pleaded, the reality hitting my stomach with a free fall. "Dad, please." Then Marlene came, screamed so shrill that for a few moments I could barely see through the disbelief of my thick head. The next several hours passed in a blur. Ambulances, whispers, and pitiful glances. The ruling, a heart attack that came from out of nowhere. It all culminated in his funeral, a series of events that felt so surreal, I navigated through the days like a ghost. And of course played the grieving widow like she was born for that very role. Her tears betrayed her, and what sobs they were. They sounded empty to me, just echoes against the stone of genuine grief that was lodged in my chest. I just can't, she wailed to anybody who would lend an ear. He was my everything, and now I am the one who has to look after Sophia. How will I manage? This only exasperated my anger. Her words were a plea for sympathy. Manage, like I was just an inconvenience, a thing to be corrected. I wanted to scream and tell her to stop pretending, but I kept mute, with my sorrow weighing down so heavily on my heart. The house after the funeral felt emptier than I could have imagined. It was a silence that weighed heavily upon us, silencing the void Dad's death had already constructed in our world. One of those long, silent afternoons is when Marlene decided to show her colors once more. We sat in the lounge room surrounded by our unspoken grievances, but it was Marlene turning to me now, eyes cold and lethal. "Now, Sophia," she said in a sickeningly soft voice. "Now wait a minute, what did I say? And the way things are gonna be." Suddenly my body stiffened from her tone. "What do you mean?" Although the last word was accompanied by a smile, it did not warm in her eyes. "You see, your father is gone, so I am your guardian, which means I own you and all your fortitude." My heart sank. I had almost already forgotten the large sum of money that Dad left, too wrapped up in my mourning to see past it. "What about it?" I managed to keep my voice steady as I asked. "Oh, sweetie, don't worry. I'll take good care of it. You know, it's what your father would have wanted," she sneered with false sympathy. Her words transported and seized my heart with the weight of 1,000-ton bricks. The last thing Dad would have wanted was for Marlene to control my life and money. "You can't do that. That's my money," I claimed, starting to get mad. Marlene's smile grew wider, but there was a scary element in her face. "Actually, I can, and I will. You're just a child, Sophia. Money management, real-life experience, who teaches you all this?" "Negative. Now it's me doing the calling. And as for you..." She stopped as if she was getting closer. "We have a place and respect yours, or we will make your life miserable." I can't let her have wreaking havoc with my life and what I had been left behind unsupervised after the warrant and this stupid guardianship nonsense from Marlene, so I'm getting every penny. It was time to fight back. However, I needed an advocate, someone to help me through the scary legal and emotional world in which I had somehow got myself entrenched. I was thinking only of Aunt Margaret, who was Dad's sister. I tried to be really nice though, because she had always been good to me, and I knew my dad said how much easier difficult times were due to the fact of having people like her around. So I reached for the phone, trembling hands dialing Aunt Margaret. Her phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hello, Aunt Margaret, it's me, Sophia." "Sophia, how are you, honey?" It was the wrong move, and now you will never know, because your guardians wrapped me in blankets long before sunrise and took me to a small county clinic for blood work. I exhaled and steadied my nerves. "I'm not good, Aunt Margaret. I need your help. It's Marlene Shays." The words exploded out of me. All my fear, all my frustration, and Marlene's mistrust spilled into the room. My Aunt Margaret was silent for a moment, but she answered in stern tone of voice. "Sophia, I suspected her grief was in your dad's eyes. Well, spill everything and we will hatch a plan." A good hour passed, me on the phone with Aunt Margaret giving her my perspective on big clothes and fakeness, passing over everyone else but myself, and most importantly expounding Marlene's plans for inheritance. The call ended with a glimmer of hope. Aunt Margaret said she would see where things lay with becoming my legal guardian and taking me away from Marlene. The following day Aunt Margaret came, and it was the raising of spirits in that house. Marlene squinted at her, detecting a change in the dynamic but unable to place it. Aunt Margaret wasted no time. "Marlene, we need to talk. It's about Sophia." Marlene crossed her arms and forced a smile. "What about her?" "It's simple. You're not fit to be her keeper. I'm going to court and collecting Sophia." The smile flickered across Marlene's face, her eyes growing wary. "You can't do that. I'm her stepmother. I have rights." Finally, I spoke up, my voice barely stronger than how I felt. "I want to live with Aunt Margaret. Marlene, I don't belong here with you." At that Marlene laughed, a bitter grating sound that resounded leeringly round the living room. "Do you even believe you're allowed to have power in this? You're just a kid. This is not your place to comment." And then Aunt Sarah stepped, the iron voice clearly bearing resolve. "Actually, it does. Sophia is 14. The law says she can choose who to live with, and now has chosen me." The last time the court ruled in Aunt Margaret's favor, I knew that this was a number 1 with a bullet for sure. It is day 1 of my life post-court. So I quickly moved in with her, leaving the likes of Marlene and all her manipulation problems behind. She didn't just stand in for my guardian, she was a mom. Not long after, it was official, and she adopted me, which just further solidified what we already had in our hearts. One night, Aunt Margaret and me sat on the porch watching a pretty orange-pink sky sunset. We were talking about grades, future bullcrap stuff when she gave me a look and asked this one question. "Sophia, you know you've got a whole world of possibilities ahead of you, right?" she said, taking a sip of her tea. I grimaced, the world of these last few years casting long shadows up ahead. "I guess. I just cannot figure out where to begin." Aunt Margaret lowered her tea, staring fully at Meatling. "Start with what you love. However, if you don't know at the moment, do not fret about it now, because remember it's your whole life to get there. But for now, it's a time of discovery, trying things out." I was fired up by her words, the dormant ambition that Marlene had almost managed to snuff out igniting. I did something I felt a little embarrassed to do. I confessed that yes, I was always into numbers and stuff like math or puzzles. Aunt Margaret's face lit up. "That's fantastic, Sophia. You know, XIZ, egg, accounting, engineering and economics. The sky's the limit." "Economics," I echoed, the word having a poetic ring to it. I liked the sound of that. After that, Aunt Margaret became my greatest supporter. She got me registered for pre-business classes in preparation to pursue an undergrad degree, and took on my dream with a fervor that was both wonderful, yet sometimes intimidating. Aunt Margaret made a banner, and we had cake. I got my scholarship acceptance into college in economics that day. Her eyes misting with proud tears, she said, "Future economist you are looking at." I laughed, hugging her tight. "Not without you, Aunt Margaret. You saved me, in so many ways." She squeezed me, probably even tighter. "We saved each other, kiddo. Remember that. We're a team." And she was right. We flipped the page together and entered into a promising future. With Aunt Margaret, it was not just a new dawn in my life. Rather, it seemed like I had started living for the first time. It had been nearly a decade since she and Marlene shared the same roof. I had managed to build a life for myself, working as an economist in one of the best private builders, and finally dared mortgage my small apartment. A little corner of the city that I told everyone was all mine. I could enjoy the goodness and uncomplicated nature of it all. Well, that was before the past came back with a vengeance one day. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when I received the phone call. Buried in reports and forecasts at my desk, I hardly even noticed when a message on my phone saying that new push came from the number of someone completely unfamiliar to me. "Is this Sophia Harrison?" The voice on the other end was icy and businesslike. "Yes, speaking. Who's this?" "This is City General Hospital. Your mom is at our hospital. She's asking for your help." A jolt of confusion hit me. There is a mistake, I think. My mom died ages ago. Then, after a pause, the caller added, "Excuse me, you are not Mrs. Harrison's mother. It's your stepmother, Marlene." Marlene just mentioning the name after all these years was a slap in the face. I was equal parts surprised, skeptical, and intrigued. "What's wrong with her?" "You see, she is hospitalized for a serious stand. She's asking to see you." I took a deep breath and felt myself say yes to the visit. "Okay, I will stop by later, end of workday." When I saw her for the first time, she was in a social ward, wraith-like compared to the robust woman I had known. All the gloss and veneer that she always showed to the world had vanished. This was a shadow of my stepmother. When she noticed me, her gaze met mine, and something flashed across her look. Maybe relief. "Sophia," she murmured, her voice as thin as the bodice of an old wedding dress. "You actually came." I pulled up a chair next to the bed, trying hard not to wear my emotions on my sleeve. "Hospital called, said you wanted to see me." She released a breath that sounded like she was giving up. "I ruined it all. The money from your father is over. So here I am, with nothing. Help, treatment and rehab reposited in you, my dear Sophia." In that cold, sterile light of the hospital room, memories flooded back to me. It all came flooding back, all those years under Marlene's roof, the comments she made that I pretended not to hear, but which cut me deep anyway. Her maneuvering for control over my kids and even our marriage, and always making sure every belly laugh from James managed to squeeze tight around his throat before it escaped. Now she was calling on me for help, but would the same have been true were our roles reversed? It was obvious from the contempt that burned in her eyes whenever she would so much as glance my way. The words fell from my lips as the water spilled into each line of me. "I remember everything, Marlene," I said with a clear voice that matched the internal stability I'd cultivated through all those years. "Every time I needed you, but you chose not to. Why should I help you now?" The illusion of vulnerability that Marlene had been meticulously constructing crumbled in an instant when she scowled her response. She spat out, "You simple, ungrateful little brat. Did I not give you a home when my heart didn't have to? You owe me. I'm your mother by law. Unless you help me, I will sue your ass off. I'll be leaving with every single dime of yours." The laughter grew inside of me and I could not contain it, ringing through the sterile walls. It was too bizarre a threat. Her desperation had gone a step beyond sanity. "Sue me? For what? You remember, Aunt Margaret adopted me. You're dead to me, the Godfather fashion. A stranger." Immediately, the realization struck Marlene with such ferocity that she appeared as if assaulted by a force of nature, her brows knitting and mouth gaping in agitation. She went off in a sort of rant that was part threat and remonstrance, but they no longer had any power over me. They had been the final weak flailings of a woman who could no longer fight. And there, with a long hard gaze at her like the first time I had ever looked at them, all that could be seen was someone very sad and feeble presenting themselves as if they held an unchallengeable power. "Marlene, and not your daughter." "True. By blood, no, and law certainly not. But you took care of that years ago." I turned on my heel and left the room, her yells of anger and desolation lessening with every stride. It felt as though she was the burden to my existence of carrying her legacy, and with that, all her problems returning. But after I took this decision, everything seemed a lot more far than present. Out of doors, the sunlight was brighter and the air more refreshing. I inhaled deeply and enjoyed it, the release, letting go. Marlene was my past, defined by time and circumstance, but a book finally closed in my life forever with the pen firmly once again rested